I took down the office predator without saying a word. You know those rare moments in life where everything just clicks? That was me a few years ago. I was working a job I absolutely loved, with a team that felt more like a found family than coworkers. There were 5 of us in total, each assigned different roles across the same portfolio of projects. And when I say these people were good, I mean jaw-droppingly good. Talented, creative, ridiculously competent, and somehow all really down to earth. Every day felt like solving intricate logic puzzles with a group of your favorite brainy friends. We were unstoppable. It sounds cheesy, but I actually got excited on Sunday nights, thinking about what we were going to tackle on Monday. We'd challenge each other, hype each other up, and crush goals without ever slipping into office drama. For someone who thrives on problem-solving and collaboration, it was a dream. I'd never felt so energized in a work environment. It was the kind of team you don't just stumble into twice in one career. But of course, nothing is ever perfect. And in our otherwise perfect little bubble, there was a shadow. His name was Steve. Now, Steve didn't work directly with us. He wasn't our boss, or even in our chain of command. But he was very senior, 3 levels above us, and had been at the company for a long time. He was chummy with executives and had that kind of unearned confidence that comes from years of skating by while everyone else cleaned up the mess. The kind of guy you just knew had skeletons in the closet. And unfortunately, everyone also knew about Steve's reputation. Steve was a creep. Not in a vague, he gives off weird vibes kind of way. No, Steve was openly inappropriate, especially toward young women in the office. He'd say lewd things in passing. He'd get handsy during company events. Nothing so over the top that HR could slam the door on him, but just enough to make you deeply uncomfortable. The kind of behavior that made the whisper network within the company kick into overdrive. In fact, my very first week, a kind older woman on my floor pulled me aside and said, "If you ever see Steve coming, make sure you're never alone with him. Trust me." I didn't ask questions, I just nodded. That was the unspoken rule for most of the women there. Avoid Steve. Steer clear. Stay safe. So that's what I did. I learned his patterns. Which hallway he walked down most often, which coffee station he favored, when he tended to roam around the office like he was looking for someone to make uncomfortable. I dodged him like my career depended on it, and maybe it did. Now, most of the time, he didn't bother me beyond a stray disgusting comment when we passed in the hall. Things I'd pretend not to hear or brush off just to keep the peace. I hated that he could make women feel this way and still keep his job. But what could I do? I didn't have proof. I didn't want to paint a target on my back. I didn't want to be that woman who rocked the boat. So I stayed quiet. Like everyone else, but that all changed one night. It was a Thursday evening, and our team had gone out for our usual casual happy hour. Just drinks and laughs after work. One of those traditions that strengthened our bond. We were halfway through our second round when Rob, one of our quieter teammates, said something that made the entire table freeze. He didn't mean to drop a bomb. In fact, it slipped out so quietly that at first we weren't even sure we'd heard him right. But when we asked him to repeat himself, Rob looked up, visibly uncomfortable, and said, "Steve's been giving me a hard time lately." That sentence changed everything. At first, we thought Rob meant something minor. Maybe Steve had been dismissive during a meeting or snapped at him in passing. Annoying, sure, but not unexpected from someone like Steve. But as Rob hesitated, his face pale and his hands nervously fidgeting with the condensation on his glass, we realized this wasn't some everyday office friction. He didn't want to say more. But we pressed. Gently, of course. And slowly, like pulling splinters from skin, the story came out. Steve had been targeting Rob. Now, Rob was easily the kindest soul on our team. Incredibly smart, but a little shy and socially anxious. He was neurodivergent, something he'd been open about with us, and sometimes his speech patterns or small tics would surface when he was stressed or overstimulated. It never affected his performance. If anything, Rob was one of the most efficient, detail-oriented people I'd ever worked with. But to someone like Steve, he probably seemed like an easy mark. And Steve had gone full predator. He'd mock the way Rob spoke, mimic his tics, ask him questions in a fake stutter, then laugh when Rob tried to respond. He told Rob he didn't understand how someone like him could possibly be qualified for the job. Called him a pity hire. Once, he even used the R word, out loud, in the hallway. No shame, no filter. Rob had tried to play it down, but it was eating him alive. He wasn't sleeping. He'd developed stomach issues from the anxiety. He was second-guessing himself constantly, questioning whether he even deserved his place on the team, and that just about broke me. Because if there was one person in the office who never deserved to be dragged through the mud, it was Rob. We were all furious. You could feel it ripple through the group like static. Anger, disbelief, protective rage. We immediately told Rob to report it to HR. What Steve was doing wasn't just bullying. It was discrimination. Straight-up harassment of someone in a protected class. He could have buried Steve if he wanted to. We assured him we'd back him up, go with him, speak on his behalf. Anything he needed. But Rob just shook his head. He begged us not to say anything. Said he didn't want to make trouble. Didn't want to risk his job or become some symbol in a fight he didn't ask for. He regretted even telling us. We tried to talk him down, but he was adamant. He wasn't ready, and we respected that. But me? I walked out of that bar seething. I couldn't sleep that night. All I could think about was Steve's smug face, Rob's quiet misery, and the fact that nobody had ever stood up to that creep. Not really. Everyone was just too afraid, or too beaten down. And that's when I made a decision. If Rob couldn't go to HR, I would. But not for him. Not directly. I would build my own case. One that had nothing to do with Rob. One that couldn't be traced back to anyone but me. I wasn't going to accuse Steve of bullying or discrimination. I was going to let him hang himself, with something I knew he was more than willing to give. Evidence. Because Steve didn't just harass vulnerable men like Rob, he harassed women too. And for the first time since I joined the company, I decided to stop avoiding him. Instead, I was going to walk right into the lion's den, and I was going to bring a camera. To be clear, I didn't do anything unethical or manipulative. I didn't flirt. I didn't lead him on. I didn't create fake scenarios or feed him lines. All I did was stop dodging him. I let myself be visible. I said hello in the hallway. I initiated casual workplace IMs. Always professional, always related to work. And it didn't take long. Steve, it turns out, was starving for attention. Within days of my polite messages about client retention and scheduling timelines, he was responding with sexual comments. Not subtle ones either. These weren't flirty or questionable. They were explicit, blatant, shameless. At first, I didn't respond. But then I realized if I wanted to show HR a pattern, I had to keep the conversation going. Not to engage, just to give him enough rope. So I started replying in a hyper-literal way. If he said something suggestive, I'd respond like I had no idea what he meant. If he followed up, I'd point out that his comment was inappropriate. I'd say things like, "This makes me uncomfortable," or "Please don't speak to me," like that. He never apologized. He never stopped. I documented everything. I saved every message, every IM. I printed out logs from our internal chat system. After every in-person encounter, every offhand comment about my body, every attempt to trap me in a creepy conversation, I'd go straight to my desk and write down exactly what he said, what time it was, and who was nearby to hear it. One day, in front of two coworkers, he actually said, "Is it legal to have an ass like that in that skirt?" I wasn't even facing him. He just said it out loud like it was funny, like it was okay. I froze, then excused myself and walked straight to my desk to write it all down. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from fury. He thought he was invincible. He thought he could keep doing this forever. Over the course of about 5 weeks, I built what I started calling my creep journal. It became my project, my mission. Every entry was methodical, clinical, detailed. I didn't embellish. I didn't guess. I just recorded the facts. And when I had enough, and I knew I had more than enough, I took it all to HR. I asked for a meeting with my representative and brought a manila folder packed with documentation. As soon as I said the words sexual harassment, the tone shifted instantly. They brought in the head of HR. 2 other reps joined. They asked to see everything, and I handed it over, one printout at a time. They asked me question after question. Did I have dates? Yes. Witnesses? Yes. Screenshots? Yes. Had I told Steve to stop? Yes, multiple times. The head of HR looked me in the eye and said, "We are going to take this very seriously." Then she asked me something unexpected. She wanted to know if I knew of any other women in the office who had dealt with similar behavior from Steve. And I did. I gave them names, not just 1 or 2. I gave them a list. Women I'd heard whisper to each other at coffee stations. Women who'd warned me my first week. Women I'd seen freeze up when Steve entered a room. I wasn't sure if any of them would talk, but I knew they had stories. HR thanked me and told me they'd be following up soon. I left the room with my heart pounding. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew something had shifted. The next move wasn't mine anymore. 2 weeks passed. I tried to focus on my work, but the wait felt endless. Every time I saw an HR email pop into my inbox, I held my breath. Every time Steve walked by, I wondered if he knew, if he had any clue that the noose was tightening. And then it happened. Got a message from my HR rep asking me to come by for a quick update. I walked in, trying to play it cool, but my nerves were buzzing. She closed the door gently behind me and said the words I'd been hoping to hear. "Steve has been let go." I just stood there for a second, processing. Then the tiniest smile crept across my face. I didn't celebrate out loud, but inside, I was screaming. He was gone. Just like that. Well, not just like that. What I didn't know at the time, but would later piece together from conversations, hallway whispers, and a few trusted friends in other departments, was that my complaint had kicked off something massive. HR hadn't just looked at my creep journal and said, "Case closed." They'd taken it as a starting point. A door that had finally cracked open after years of being locked shut. They started contacting the women I had listed, quietly, respectfully, asking if they'd ever had similar experiences. And once they realized an actual investigation was underway, the stories started pouring in. One by one, women who had stayed silent for years came forward. First it was 3, then 5, then 10. In the end, I was told it was over 15 women who gave formal statements, and that was just the official count. Who knows how many more never spoke up even then. One story hit me hard. A junior staffer, just a year out of college, had been assaulted by Steve at a company holiday party the year before. She'd never told anyone. Thought no one would believe her. Thought she'd be fired if she spoke out. But when she heard that Steve was under investigation, she came in and told HR everything. That's when it went from misconduct to criminal. IT had also been pulled into the process. HR needed to verify my logs, so the tech team combed through Steve's email and IM history, and what they found confirmed it all, and then some. Not only were my transcripts 100% legit, but there were countless other messages. Dozens of women, dozens of incidents, some worse than mine, some flat-out horrifying. That's when leadership knew there was no saving him. Still, as satisfying as it was to know he'd been fired, there was one detail that really stuck in my throat. Steve didn't leave quietly. He was given a severance package, a generous one. HR didn't confirm it officially, but someone in finance let it slip, and word traveled fast. At first, I was furious. How could someone like that walk away with a padded bank account after everything he'd done? But then, the second wave of fallout began. Steve's termination wasn't some quiet internal event. The industry heard about it almost immediately. This wasn't the kind of field where scandals stay buried. And when companies started asking questions, they found answers. No one would hire him. He was blacklisted. Untouchable. The kind of guy whose name was followed by long, uncomfortable silences in professional circles. The last time I checked his social media, he was calling himself an independent consultant and promoting some shady multi-level marketing junk. You could see the desperation in his posts. No clients. Just vague motivational quotes and nonsense, hashtags. He thought he was too powerful to fall, but all it took was one person keeping receipts.
The case has been heard. The stories have been told. Now it's your turn to judge. Leave your verdict in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. The Court of Stories is always in session.